A very good evening and a warm welcome to the program. We're coming to you from Kabalagala at the Media Challenge Initiative Media Hub. We're being hosted tonight to host this particular day ahead of 3rd May, which is World Press Freedom Day tomorrow. I'm excited about my guest today. He is one of those people that I admire in the media industry, a young person who is doing things different and doing things not selfishly, but for the young generation of upcoming journalists. So I'm happy to have you, Abbas. Mpindi Abbas is the founder, is the CEO?
Co-founder, CEO.
Co-founder and CEO of the Media Challenge Initiative. It's good to have you, Abbas. Thank you for agreeing to do this show and also for agreeing to host me.
It's an honor
to have the show in your space.
Welcome home.
I feel at home. It feels like a journalist should be here.
I mean, ideally this is a home for journalists. So anytime we have a journalist of your caliber here, it feels even more than home for us as well.
All right. Abbas, I want to get into what all of this is about. I know what it's about, but I want us to share it with everybody else that's watching.
Yeah.
What is your story? How did you not end up the way the rest of us have ended up in a newsroom, growing up in the newsroom, and then eventually leaving it? But you getting to here, what's that story?
So there are components to the story.
I want the story that starts with the internship.
But before that, my love for journalism dates back to days with my grandmother. I grew up with my grandmother and my mom. My mom died, then I stayed with my grandmother. She didn't go to school, so in most cases she would want to know what's happening in the world. So she would ask me to switch on the radio or translate newspaper stories into Rutoro. So, and from that experience you could see a spark in her eyes. So
you were translating newspaper stories?
Yes.
Explain.
So we would get old newspapers. Our uncles have come from Kampala, they bring them to Fort Portal. And so my granny would say, so tell me what is in these stories. So I have to read first English and then translate. The thing that stood out for me at that point was the more she got to know about what was happening in the world, the more you could see like a spark in her eyes of like, oh, now I know what's happening in Rwanda, now I know what's happening in other countries. And for me, that was the beginning of like, journalism can really make the world a better place. And
information.
Access to information is really important.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was young telling like friends that I really want to be either on radio or TV. And it seemed like one of those biggest jokes. And so fast forward, I wanted to do journalism at the university, but I ended up first doing development, adult and community education. And then in there, I said I still wanted to pursue a career in journalism. So I went to UMCAT, studied a diploma, and I had to go for an internship. So that's how we get.
That's how that story starts.
That's how we get to the internship phase.
What I like about your previous story with information coming out as the key theme of why you wanted to do journalism. This year's theme for World Press Freedom Day is information as a public good. Yeah. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation now.
The theme is for me is close to home because I could tell that story, my experience with my granny and how it would change whatever she would be experiencing through information of like a 10-year-old shared. But internship. So how the whole story about MCI starts is I go to ask for an internship at a TV station. And because I didn't know anyone, I am told that I need to know someone in there for me to get an internship. And I think the person who told me wasn't, as recently I'm beginning to think about it, that person didn't have any power or control over what happens. But in their mind,
you must know someone.
That's how the system works. So, and being a student then, I just said, okay, I don't know anyone, then I walked back. But as I'm walking back, and I'm thinking, but wait, I have the passion, the skills, I'm interested, and I think that I can do something in the media space. And I realized that there are very many young people who don't have those strategic connections, quote unquote, and they don't have a platform to be seen. And that's how the idea of like what I call democratizing nepotism in a way that let me surround an editor or a media manager with as many talented young people as we can so that they run out of choice of choosing their...
They have no choice but
Yeah,
to choose
but
talent
to choose the
over
talent rather than
blood
their...
or friend
yeah,
or something.
exactly.
Okay.
Now, I go back to school and with my friends we start the Ballet Francis news anchoring competition. And we go to Ballet Francis and we say, hey, Mzee, we need your name to brand this inter-university media contest. And he's like, go ahead, as long as you don't ask me to find money for you. So don't include me in the fundraising. And I was like, fair enough, we only need your name. So we had a budget of 99 million Uganda shillings. And every time we would move to spaces, they would say, have you ever like handled 1 million even? And I remember we ended up getting 300,000 Uganda shillings to actually do this competition.
Hold on, you had a budget of 99 million?
Yes.
You didn't have cash of 99 million?
No, it
That
didn't
was
have.
on paper, the 99?
Yeah, this is on paper, proposal with
Okay.
a budget that needs 99 million to showcase what we really wanted to do. So we end up getting only 300,000 Uganda shillings, and it was from Simba Telecom. I remember that very well. And I do recall that we had already had like 6 universities sign up to participate. So there was no stopping. So we had to get into our pockets as students. We had a savings group where we would collect 500 shillings a coin.
Sorry, you and who? Who are these people that
So
were surrounding
my
you?
co-founders,
Okay.
Ivan Chimuli Chigozi, Simon Peter Senyondo, Anthony Kisembo, and then there was also Nalunga Hawa. But by then, at that point, we were working as a guild council. So we had like a big group. And we tried to get, resources here and there, and we ended up organizing the event anyways. So I think that's the worst event I've ever organized, because the idea was, just imagine you put like news anchors and reporters on stage for them to present like a news bulletin. And we had planned for lapel mics, for like screens. All that didn't happen because the budget.
300,000 shillings.
Yeah. So we ended up giving the anchors a microphone, like MCs, so they were holding a microphone on set, and we were sharing hall in Zambia. So anytime the power would just like go off, we didn't have a generator, and we would wait for like 1 hour. I remember students rising up to basically fight, because if it's UCU on set and the power goes, it feels like we are jeopardizing them. So they would come against like, hey, now you're like, it was really heated until like 4 p.m. when Ballet Francis walked in, the late, and everyone was quiet. I was like, yes, this is it. And I was like, oh, this is changing pretty fast. And when we were done with the event, like around 10 in the night, the old man came to us and said, I'm really proud of you, great job. And in my heart, I was like, you just don't know what happened this whole day, but thank you so much. From that day, I swore I would never organize this event again. I gave up, I went home. 2-3 months later, I would meet a student in a taxi and they would tap on my shoulder and say, hi, Mr. Bass. I know you don't know me, but I got an internship from the event.
Wow.
And that was like, so it works, yeah? Fine. And then we started to see students coming saying, hey, when is the next? And we're curious, but you wanted to fight, like beat us and all that. So now you want another event? So we continued, then we had the government come on board, the Office of the Prime Minister.
That's when you moved the event.
Yes, then we moved the event to the Office of the President. And NTV came on board. And then we started to take the students to the NTV studios, Walter Mwesye, and
Yeah.
Cliff Wamalas, all those guys. And then now the project kicked off until 2016 when we opened the Media Challenge Academy that brings in the students. So that's really the story behind how the MCI started.
First of all, I won an award from you guys.
MCI
I think
awards.
the Rosemary Nankabira,
Yes.
News Anchor Award. So thank you for that recognition. But also, just coming to this space and looking at what it's like, and listening to the journey of where you started, and this is how many years ago?
8.
8 years ago. In 8 years, what you've managed to do is tremendous.
Thank you.
I know that for a lot of people, after that first event, it doesn't matter if you know, that would be it.
You give up. And I think that we've honestly given up many, many times, but maybe we've not totally gotten out of the space. But I'm very sure that there's just moments where we felt like, I don't think this is going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like in 2016, we opened the MCI Academy. We rented the space, no capital, nothing. And we had our little savings in Kansanga then. And for me, at like 2017, we were at the age of like, this was a great idea. We were very ambitious, and I think we should just let it go. And then we had this idea of recording a video where we would say, hi, my name is Abbas, and I work for Media Challenge Initiative. We have this big concept. Building the next generation of journalists. You should work with us because of ABC and D. And we sent like 99 videos to different embassies and sponsors and funders. And one organization saw the video and they called us to their office and they said, okay, we'll give you CAS, Conrad Adenauer Stiftung. And they gave us 6,000 euros. That was like, savior. We had never had anyone give us anything like that. So for us, it was like, whew, 6,000 euros.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, people believe in this work. Let's continue working. So
we're going to go around your studio and the entire space just to get a feel of, how far you've come. But I'm still amazed when I look now. I mean, just looking behind you and I see the MCI Media Hub. It's so bright and looking very shiny. I'm very proud of how far you've come.
Thank you.
You're a journalist, and the team that you work with are journalists.
Yeah.
Most of them, at least I know that Ivan is a journalist. Tomorrow is World Press Freedom Day. How do you feel about it? What are you thinking about it?
So I think that it's a very monumental time for anyone in journalism to be able to reflect on this day. But at the same time, it's coming at the time when here in Uganda, journalists are also going through a very hard time. So we've just seen like one of the former, I think, Uja president was killed. So when you look at like some of those incidents, you begin to think, the people we train here, where are they going? What space are we training these young journalists to go to?
Are we actually equipping them to handle?
Are we equipping them to be in the next generation of journalists? And so for me, just to celebrate this one day may not just be enough, because there are very many issues that are not being addressed. But for us to come together, of course, we can reflect and say, okay, but I don't think it's enough. I think there is more work that needs to be done to commit to the safety and security of journalists, not just by media houses, but the government itself, to say if we make promise and have a football match and, and actually play with the media leaders, the journalists the next day should not get beaten.
I was actually going to bring up the brutality. You mentioned Cliff, and I remember John Cliff Wamala was your person here, and he was one of those people that was hit really hard on his head. When you see things like that, how do you give assurance to the young people that come here for internship or training that there's some kind of safety? What do their parents must be thinking, I don't want my child in that field anymore. What is it like for you seeing that and then coming here the next day to try and give hope to these kids? Young people,
I mean,
not kids.
initially we were aware of the brutality against journalists in Uganda and globally, but I think it had never hit home, like when Cliff was involved, that we kept talking about the alumni program here and providing support to those journalists, but we had never actually reflected that you will have a young journalist that you've trained get into this kind of trouble. So we have had to like think about our alumni program and how we can support either legal support or mental health support, which are some of the initiatives we are pitching to partners.
Okay.
It's hard because you see we are building a community, so some of that news and information comes into the community, and some people are like, you know what,
this is not for me.
I think I should. So we have a lot of young journalists who had the passion, but now they're saying, okay, I think I'm going into public relations and communication. It's hard, but at the same time there is hope, because there's still many young journalists who see that and say, we want to be journalists.
We want to go out there.
We want to go out there and we
do.
want to report those stories that people are hating. So that's where the hope is.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Abbas. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We're coming to you from the Media Challenge Initiative Media Hub in Kabalagala, and they're hosting us for this particular episode of the show tonight as we speak to the co-founder and the CEO
yes.
of the initiative, Abbas Mpindi. Abbas was speaking earlier about the brutality and so on, and I wanted to know, what do you hope for in continuing with this work? What do you come in every day hoping to see happen with the journalism industry, the media industry in Uganda?
My why of keeping anchored into this work is again, for me, it's not like the hope for it's now. And my past of, I know journalism can make the world a better place. And with that background, each and every young journalist that goes through our program has that mentality, and whatever story they are doing, whether it's an investigation or whether it's solutions journalism or just a human interest story, they have to have that thinking that they are going to make someone's life better. It could be make that person smile, it could be holding the government accountable, it could be providing solutions that other people can replicate. So my hope is that we will see very many young journalists come out of this program, improve the media industry professionally, and tell stories that change the narrative about our continent, our country, and show some of those stories that ideally we don't see in the media spaces. So especially we train them in solutions journalism. So we hope that that sort of journalism thinking can begin to take shape in the media spaces.
What do you see as the standard right now? How would you rate how the field is doing?
It's hard.
Honestly.
It's hard. I think that there are days and times when you feel like, wow, like I've seen this story on maybe this platform and it was amazing. And I think looking at where we were maybe like 10 years back and where we are now and the competition in the space, we are doing good. If you look at like also what media storytelling innovations are coming up as well from independent young storytellers, you realize it's not anymore, and that's where for me my hope is, that the next quote-unquote Josephine's Karunji might not be on TV mainstream, but they may be hosting their own platforms online, and that they're able to tell stories from all their communities, whether be it in Karamoja or in Gulu or in Yumbe or in Chisoro, without necessarily relying on like the broadcasters that are here in the capital. So I see that coming up, and we have an innovation project here that is beginning this year to find some of those rural media innovators as well.
Okay.
So I think we're doing great. I can't have maybe a scale of a sort, but we're
I'm
good
not giving you a
improving.
scale. I don't want people to come looking for you after the show.
What research did I use?
When you think about, you spoke about the brutality, but what other challenges do you see for journalists now? When you look around and you engage with the young people that were from here but have gone out, or your peers who actually went to mainstream media right after university or from wherever they were coming, what challenges do you see that are a big hindrance for the growth of this industry?
The money. I think that unfortunately, I mean, there are many challenges that media houses are facing around business, but the more we continue to pay journalists very little money, the more we have them open to bribery, corruption, journalism, like machineries of the sort, fake news. So there has to be ways of really compensating, finding ways of compensating. You'd rather have like a lean team that you can pay very well, and they can be proud to do that sort of work. So it's not just like the salary, but it's also the working conditions, their safety and security when they're out there, after they've gone into the trouble, or they had an accident. What sort of insurance do we have in place for them? So there are all those things that make you want to be in the media, but at the same time they are not offered there, but you can run out. And so I've had very painful conversations where someone who has just been there for like not even 2 years, and they're telling you, I want to move out. And you're like, why? And it comes back the same conversation of money. I think that the other challenge that there is of course, I think the thinking within the media space, especially editors and media managers that have been there. This idea of I know it all is deterring young people from
coming with their fresh ideas.
And fresh ideas. And I think that if you are open to welcoming some of these ideas, you can really get the best out of these young people who are tech savvy, who are trainable. So there's,
I mean, it's a changing landscape.
Yes,
if you keep your eyes closed and say we're going to keep with what we knew. And
the media is changing very fast. One of those industries where we're having a lot of change. And you realize that the people in the system we can write about, emphasizing to other people to change out there, but inside we don't want to change. And for me, I think that's ironical.
Yeah, it is. You spoke earlier about the pay, and I think that's a really, really big issue because it's very little. Do you have a sense of what of how little it is?
I do, and I think it's just I'm shy even because I hear people who say they do, especially up country. If you have a story where someone is paid like 5,000 or even 500 to do a story, if such a person gets,
if someone says I'm giving you 150,000 to pay you off,
just 10,000 to not take this story, they will not publish the story. So I think the other challenge is the ownership of the media in Uganda is also when you have like a big percent of the media houses owned by politicians, especially up country. So that means we usually say whose truth are we telling?
Press freedom?
Yes, whose truth are we telling? information for public good, but is it really? So if
someone's good.
Yeah, so someone has to be like, if you start a media house, like then give journalists the opportunity to run it and give them
pay them
well to do really
do
great
their job.
stories, because I think great journalism can make great money for any media house.
What solutions should we be looking at?
So there are a number of.
You spoke about lean newsrooms, and I know some media
Yeah.
houses are already going that direction. But what else?
So a lean team, or a lean team that is also trained technically to produce content across platforms, so that you are able even to, if we are talking about, we are moving from mainstream to also have like digital presence and make digital cash or money, then it means we have to invest on the digital platforms and see how many subscribers we can get on our platforms. And that means you have to produce content that suit that space. And there are examples with all these international media houses that are doing that. There is the idea also of building communities around media houses, that you are able to work with the communities that can invest back. So it could be communities in the diaspora that are able to produce content that you can work with. It could be your own community that even when your station is closed, the community can rise up and say, this is our radio station, it should be back on air. So there's the pressure of like, it's not just about the money, it's also about how we work with communities that we serve. And I think, of course, there is the idea of the trainings. We still have the same journalists, but we are not giving, and the world is changing and the content needs are changing, but we're not training them to have the mindset of like, as a journalist, I'm also in business. So I should think about what is the cost of the story that I'm going to do to the media house before I actually go to the field to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. With COVID-19, I must, touch a little bit on that. I know it affected all of us in one way or the other. Last year was, it was new, and everybody was just still trying to figure out what to do, how to approach it. Media houses were figuring out how to be. What was MCI's contribution, for example, to society in that time? I remember seeing some of your young people reaching out and saying, listen, if your journalists cannot, make it to work or something, we're going to stand in.
Yes.
So what was the contribution?
When the lockdown was announced, we had just finished the fellowship. So we knew, okay, the program is over now. So we had just started the MCI radio, and we realized our community just has everyone from Uganda. It's diverse. So we brought them together and asked them to translate COVID prevention messages into their local languages. So like we had Lingala, we had, had all the like around 20 languages translated. And then we shared via WhatsApp. And our idea was, I think that a lot of people, most of the prevention messages are either in English and dominantly Luganda, and struggling to translate in the other smaller languages. So, and we have people from those communities, so we said, okay, let's translate. The other thing we did was to develop infographics around how journalists can report about COVID-19. And we ran a campaign called I Will Stand In, where we said, we are here as volunteers, as a reserve force, just in case you run out of reporters, or they then were saying, journalists are at the front line, so anything can happen.
Yeah, if they get sick.
You were seeing that journalists had like different shifts. So if one shift is off or gets someone who is sick, it means you are left with one. If this one also gets someone who is COVID positive, then you don't have anyone. So we offered that. As a community, the young journalists were willing to stand in Fortunately, we did not get to use the reserve force because the media houses were
I think
still
media houses
equipped.
are also thinking about if your team comes in to stand, with us and
Standing,
work,
yeah.
and then one of them gets sick, and then,
Yes.
there's
We
a
were
lot
committed.
of complication. There's a lot of complications there. Thank you, Abbas. We're going to take another short break, but when we return, Abbas is going to take us around the hub so we can see the amazing work that his team is doing.
Excited.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Tomorrow is World Press Freedom Day, and ahead of that day, tonight we interview a journalist who went all out to get young journalists and to figure out how to help them to get into media organizations, but to also do journalism differently. So we're speaking to Mpindi Abbas, and we're now going around what the Media Challenge Initiative Hub looks like. What is this room, Abbas? This is a studio?
Yes, so this is our TV studio or TV training room.
Okay.
What you see here in the background is one of the sets of the fellows or students that we train in our program. So they started the DIBA, which is a fact-checking show.
This was during COVID-19, right? Yeah, I think I remember this, yeah.
The lockdown, and they were required to produce, to debunk fake news around COVID-19. Misinformation around the coronavirus. Over there we have a control room.
Okay.
So if you have any events streaming, but really in line with journalism, that's where we train our young journalists on how to edit.
Okay. And so what is this room?
This is
A radio station.
So this is our production space for radio. We have an online radio, again in line with journalism training. We make sure that our young journalists have practical hands-on.
Okay, I see a parent of a young journalist, or I see a young journalist watching and thinking, how do I get into the media? How do I get to be trained by the Media Challenge Initiative? What does it require? I remember what it was like before with the initiative when you'd have the debates.
Yeah.
What is the process now?
So there are very many processes. The first one is you must be a young journalist out there in the university, and you can participate in our fellowship program where we get to identify.
Abbas, I've always wanted to be on radio.
Yes, this is your...
This feels like, is this for radio?
This is home.
For podcasts? Or
So we do podcasts, we do radio shows here, we train our young journalists in this space, and it allows them to give each other feedback. I think the best thing is for them to be able to, you know when you don't know how to run this machine or you've never seen it before, it can be very scary, or even just having the microphone
you don't know what to touch.
So the idea of putting a young journalist in a real live studio space allows them to build confidence.
It's the practice that we don't get in school.
Yes. So if there's anything we sell here, it's the confidence and the repetitive action and our own willingness as trainers to say, it's okay, you can do it again. And we have the time and we're allowed to make mistakes.
At MCI Radio with MC Juma and Helen.
It's of course a very good morning wherever you're listening to MCI Radio. Welcome to today's
Monday morning down here in 256, and to our dear listeners, welcome to the AM.
Uganda will fully reopen when 4.4 million people get COVID-19 jabs.
Nja kutegeeza nti nafuna obulwadde nga nina emyaka 17 kyesi kyakwogera eri bantu.
Who are your trainers? Who do you bring in to come and speak to the young people and build that confidence, or even just to get a sense of the hands-on experience? Because this is not like a lecture room.
Yeah. We have a team of trainers here that have gone through training of trainers, so their approach to training is totally different from a lecture room method. And then we are supported by mentors in the media industry who we reach out to and say, hey, would you give an inspirational talk or train young journalists how to write, how to shoot.
So talk to me about this room. I see social media everywhere.
So this is the social media studio. I think one of the things that we need to highlight as, again, we celebrate World Press Freedom Day is the need for innovation to train journalists on how to produce new age content, new media content. So we've created this social media studio where we can produce content for social media, TikTok, so that you can still be a journalist and produce for the socials.
Okay.
And it's also a room that we use when we have conferences, to have conversations, to host like a press conference. You can come here. We'll change everything for you.
That feels like an advert, but I'll let you get there.
So, but in terms of really supporting journalism, we try to see how can we create a space that allows young talents to think beyond their usual classroom feeling.
I think the question for me here is, what's new in the field of journalism that main media is not doing, outlets are not doing, that the young people here learn and are able to take into the traditional media houses where they work? What are your journalists doing different? What's your initiative teaching them?
So, I mean, fact-checking, for example, is one of those skill sets that you don't get at the uni unless you chance to attend a workshop or be online.
Yeah.
So we provide them with the fact-checking opportunities for them to learn how to do that, and that's an opportunity I think media houses need. We train them in social media and producing content for the socials.
Okay. So this is the wider space where we've been, right?
Yes.
I like that journalism can make the world a better place.
Yes. That's what keeps us moving. So in whatever we do, if we are tired, if we are demotivated, if we are seeing what's happening out there and we are tired of whatever, this is ideally where we come and say, okay, this is our
space.
This is our space. We can make the world a better place using journalism, and that's the message we send to the world. So if you are here, if you come here, this is the first thing you see, and it changes the way you think about journalism. It changes the way you want journalism to, what you want journalism to give you. And it also raises the bar higher for whoever we are training, for them to prepare themselves for doing journalism and making the world a better place.
What's been the hardest thing for you about putting all of this together?
Of course, I mean, the idea of thinking out of range of what is existing and creating a space that you have to sell to the world and make them believe that, okay, it has, of course, the issues of managing it, those we will handle.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's the idea of creating a new journalism space that is not in the country, that has not maybe existed before, and seeing how it can create impact. And it's also happening, like 1 month ago we launched it, so now we're celebrating, we're going to celebrate World Press Freedom Day for us from an innovation perspective.
What has been your biggest failure so far?
As an individual, as an organization?
With the Media Challenge initiative?
I think that our biggest failure is to manage, I think, sometimes expectations. And we are learning to know that we cannot do it all. So we have a lot of, as a media and young organization, there is just a lot of expectations on you have to achieve certain things, and sometimes we've failed to really manage those expectations. But we've also been kind to ourselves to understand that we've done what we could, and we wake up every day knowing that we want to do our best. Our hope is that whoever we work with, whichever journalist we train, will end up doing that.
Making the world a better place.
Yeah, and we hope that they can thrive in the media houses where we end up like sending them or working with them. And that, I think, for me, the challenge is you train students for, like, let's say, a future of journalism, but they have to work in an environment where sometimes the system is still like, you can't bring such ideas here. And then they come back to you and say, yeah, we learned all these things, but when we go there,
We can't practice
so like
them.
solutions journalism, they go and then someone says, but we don't do that here. Maybe it's public relations. And then we have to manage their expectation and say, it's okay, first of all, it's not your
Ease
job.
into it.
Ease into it.
Yeah.
In the next, but still be anchored on your values. No, if you get an opportunity to be an influencer in the space, then you have an opportunity to bring those ideas into place and make sure that those who come after you don't find the same system that you found.
What's been your biggest success?
I could say setting up this space this year is a huge success for MCI, knowing where we started from and having a home and a hub that is meant to attract, journalist correspondents. We want that correspondents across the world, if they are in Uganda, they could go to hotels and do whatever, but they could also come here and maybe meet a stringer or meet a young journalist to work with, rent out equipment, do stories with local media. We also want to be able to work with media houses and say, you have a lean team, but you could hire out our newsroom, small newsroom of young journalists, to produce content. And that's the innovative side of what has been, what I would say has been a success for us. And of course, building the community of young journalists across the country, and somehow even East Africa, because we have a lot of young ones who come from Kenya, Tanzania. So knowing that we also want to expand at a certain point and serve and be like in Kenya, in Tanzania in the future. But for now, I think, for me, I consider this space as a big, big highlight for us.
I like that you had a dream. This sounds cliche, but you had a dream. And I mean, look at all of this. If you look around, I hope the camera can take us around the room just to get a sense of what it all looks like. We started from those two chairs, and it's a very large place, and it accommodates so many people and so many dreams. So your dream has accommodated so many other people's dreams. And I want us to close the show from here. What would you like whoever has been watching to take home from our conversation? Your final thoughts.
One, support journalism and pay expensively for journalism as you consume it, because it's the money that you invest in journalism to provide information to you.
I see a lot of news outlets, print outlets, putting it out there and saying, listen, support us and we don't want to close.
Yes, because they are closing, and I think it's important for the public to know how important supporting journalism is, and it should be an obligation to the public to be able to know, like, we know that we need journalists, and we have to support them.
You need good information, quality information, put your money there.
So I would say, if you're a parent and your son or daughter, they want to be journalists, please allow them to be. I know the space looks constrained.
It looks deadly.
It looks deadly, if that's the word, but I think they have a role to play in creating a better world through their stories.
Thank you so much, Abbas. Thank you for taking us around, for giving us your space to use for this particular episode. We really appreciate it.
Honored.
And thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing to you and the team that you work with to make all of this happen. I just want to say thank you on behalf of all of us journalists who never got to experience this kind of training before we were thrown into the deep end of the newsroom. And I actually know that from my previous experience working with the media organization, that the journalists that came, having gotten this training, were all rounders and they had a sense of what they were doing. So there's a remarkable difference from having the practice before you just come with the theory that you got from school. So I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you once again for hosting us. I love your space.
Thank you.
And coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.